You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode number 5. And if you wish that your teen could have more time for the things that they enjoy outside of their study and have a healthier life balance, but without sacrificing those academic results, then stay tuned for specific steps and the one key concept to making that happen. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Hello, my very important parents. I am so happy to be here with you today because this topic is one that I know is so important to so many of you. Having a healthy life balance for your teen is such an important aspect of life and study for teenagers today, and in particular for those hardworking ones who really want to achieve to the best of their ability, who maybe have some perfectionist tendencies, and who really are living by that belief that them having more knowledge, more time slaving over textbooks is what's going to increase their results. Not that hard work is not required, but as you know from episode 1 of the podcast, there are more effective ways to achieve their grade goals than doing that. And the concept that I'm going to share with you here today has made a huge difference to so many students who I've trained and coached who've actioned this. And I've also had a lot of parents tell me that they've even used this as well for themselves. So this is all about optimizing our time and tasks and maximizing our free time. And doing it in a way that means we can actually enjoy that free time so that we don't feel guilty, we don't feel like we should be working or studying or doing chores or whatever else it might be. And let's be honest, that chores part is probably more for us as the adults. Please tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the teenagers are quite so concerned with all the chores. Anyway, you may have already noticed that nowhere in the title or the description of this podcast, nowhere so far have I said the words time management. And that's for good reason, because we can't actually manage time. We can't speed it up when we're doing things that we dislike, when we're sat in dull meetings, or when your teen is sat in a boring assembly. Don't tell the school leaders that I said that. And we can't slow it down when we're doing the things that we love, or make more of it when we're up against a deadline, unfortunately. If you know differently, please share your secrets with me. I want to know them. But we can control how we use our time. So to keep this focused on your teen and their study, I'm talking about things like how they organize and tackle their tasks, how much time they're actually spending on them, what things they prioritize and what those priorities are based on, how much time they're spending focused and actually on task, and how much time is spent drifting into other things. Now, you can go check out episode 3 if your teen does easily get distracted or ends up procrastinating or is just spending time on things that maybe feel productive but aren't so necessary. Because here's how I see a lot of students trying to manage their time and tasks and the issues, the sometimes sneaky issues with these methods. If they're like a lot of the students that I work with, they'll be doing or saying things like, I'm going to do 2 hours of maths every Tuesday evening. Maybe they even color it in on their calendar, probably with the latest fancy highlighter. But they don't have a clear idea of exactly what they're going to have completed or produced in that time. They haven't strategically decided what the very best practice questions would be to do in that 2 hours. They just kind of do some and see how they go. Or they're writing out big to-do lists. And if they are anything like me, those to-do lists start with something at the top that has already been done, just so that we can get it ticked off straight away and get those feel-good vibes happening. But those to-do lists end up being a never-ending treadmill. I'm sure you've had this happen for yourself. I always remember one of my next level students, Josh, saying how he'd get something done, he'd tick it off, but he'd already have another 2 or 3 things added to the bottom of the list, and that he just ended up feeling, his words, demoralized by that massive list. Or maybe they've got a big wall planner. They've got all their assessment deadlines written on, probably in red pen, which feels like they're being organized. And it's supposed to make things feel like they're under control and in order. But so often, this actually ends up creating overwhelm for them. Seeing all those deadlines and the huge tasks all laid out on one big sheet actually just makes things feel more daunting, not less so. And I know that has been the case for me as well. In fact, it really still is. When I've got certain weeks where I end up with lots of big things on, whether it's consults or webinars and interviews, I immediately feel stressed just looking at it all on one sheet. So I just don't do that anymore. I'll share what I do instead because I really do practice what I preach. In fact, a lot of these systems and strategies are things that I have really evolved for myself as well as for students over many, many, many years. So to be clear, none of this is their fault. I don't want this list to sound like a big long list of criticisms and things that they are not supposed to be doing and they shouldn't be doing those things. These are all things that we see given as advice or tips, like make sure you know all your deadlines and have them displayed where you can see them. Write a to-do list and tick off each thing as you go. In fact, the good news is it's actually a great sign if your teen is doing any or all or some of these things, because it shows that they're at least trying to manage that time well. I just did the little inverted comma sign with my fingers there for manage their time, because stress does not come from having too much to do. It comes from not knowing how you're going to get it all done. It comes down to that how. You're going to hear me talk a lot about how on this podcast. It's like that good old phrase, work smarter, not harder. Sounds great, but how? Like really, exactly, specifically, how are they supposed to do that? How should they and could they be doing that in a way that works for them? Well, for a start, remember, we are not trying to figure out how to manage time. They need to get instead strategic and efficient with their time and the tasks. And the best way on how to do that is by scheduling outcomes. Scheduling outcomes is the overarching strategy behind all of the actual specific systems that I train students in to help them get organized, efficient, calm, super effective in their study. It is the core concept for the throw out the to-do list system that I teach in Catapult 2 of the 10-week grade transformation program. And actually also for the reverse engineered revision planning system. That's in Catapult 5. Although I actually created that system before I formalized the concept of scheduling outcomes. So like I said, these things do evolve as they become proven and tested. So here's what I mean by scheduling outcomes. For each and every task, your teen needs to know what they actually need to do or plan to produce, and in what time frame and when. So what they actually need to or plan to produce, what the outcome is, and in what time frame and when, what their schedule is. For example, instead of saying, okay, tonight I'm going to work on my maths homework, it's I'm going to get these specific 5 maths questions done. They know which 5 it is in 1 hour, and it's going to happen between 7 till 8 p.m. Or instead of I'm going to work on some research for my legal studies report this weekend, it's, okay, I'm going to have 6 high quality usable sources, and it's going to take me 2 hours to find them. I'm going to do that on Saturday morning from 9:30 till 11:30 a.m. Plus, maybe I'm going to need some definitions for all the key terminology, and I predict that's going to take 45 minutes to get all that down, and I'm going to do that after lunch on the Saturday. Let's say it's 1 till 1:45 p.m. And then when that time comes, they set a timer. They actually set a timer, and then they get to work. Because it's amazing how having a timer helps keep that focus and motivation high. The temptation to get distracted it's not necessarily going to totally disappear, but we become a lot more aware of it. If we start to drift or get distracted, instead of just letting that happen, we're onto ourselves more quickly because we're like, okay, I need to come back to this. I'm doing this thing and I've only got maybe 45 minutes to get it done. Now, this does not just, of course, in itself fix everything, but it does really shine a light on where time is being wasted or where your team might be under or overestimating the time that things will take. So the two parts are the outcome, exactly what's going to be produced, and the schedule, how much time it's actually going to take, and specifically when they're going to do it. And we want each of those tasks, or specifically the outcomes, to be taking around 20 minutes to an hour, which means that your team needs to chunk down any of those bigger tasks. They definitely don't want to be saying, okay, I've got an English essay to write and it's going to take me 6 hours. Or sometimes that might be more like 6 days, right? They need to break big assignments into subtasks. So they need to be asking themselves, okay, what are the steps or the sections that are required? And of course, this is where you can offer help by asking them those questions. What are the steps required? How are we going to break this down? So that you can help guide them and structure things, but you're not actually sort of doing those things for them. We want them to get thinking, okay, what is the first thing I need to do to write this essay? And bonus tip, the first thing should not be writing the introduction for any extended task, whether it's a feature article, a persuasive speech, a movie review, because how can you write an introduction if you haven't written anything else yet? They don't actually know what it is they're introducing. So lots of students end up getting stuck at the first hurdle because they think that's where they need to start. That isn't where they need to start. So the beauty of this is that it actually does force your team to plan more and be a lot more methodical in their work. Something that, if they are busy, they will likely tell you they don't have time for. But I promise, any time spent planning, they will get back at least double that amount of time in the writing and editing phases. And the result will be a higher quality piece as well. They're going to have to put it to the test to prove it true, but this is absolutely always the truth of it. So if they're not starting with an introduction, what do they need to start with? How can they break down those bigger tasks? Well, firstly, they need to dissect the question. Then they need to consider what their response will be. Plan out the key points that they're going to cover, what evidence or quotes that's going to require, and that might mean that they need to go do some preliminary research first too. All that has to happen before any sort of actual writing begins. And all those things need to be scheduled. How much time is each of those tasks, those subtasks, those outcomes going to take, and when is it going to happen? Plus, they need to consider any what I call pre-tasks. Are there things that they need to collect or get ready or have before they can actually get started? Whether it's maybe collecting a library book or certain equipment or having worksheets done. These sorts of things really can hold tasks up if they're done as just afterthoughts or they're just not done in the most efficient order. And another bonus of chunking down like this is that it removes a lot of the overwhelm of those big tasks. Saying, I'm going to write one body paragraph and I'm going to aim to do it in the next 30 minutes feels very different to saying, okay, I'm going to sit down and write an essay. And I'm going to spend an hour researching to find 3 art pieces that represent a particular theme, feels much more manageable and is a whole lot more focused than just go do research for art project. So tasks get done faster and more efficiently and to a higher standard because they are not just rushing these things. They are planning them more carefully, doing things in a structured order, in a timely fashion, and most likely with less distractions. Plus, it's also less likely that these things are now going to build up to the last minute. So another benefit, I think this is a third positive we're up to now of all of this, is that it builds awareness. Awareness of how long tasks do actually take. Because I know that you might be thinking, okay, well, let's say they planned 30 minutes to answer those history homework questions, but actually it took them an hour. Or they got to the end of the 30 minutes and then they had to go to soccer training, so they couldn't finish it. What do we do now? Well, number one, this is giving them useful information. Why did it take twice as long? Were they getting distracted on their phone? Were they missing something that they needed so that going and getting that took up more time? Were they writing more than they needed to in their answers? Was it just more difficult? Did they not know the content as well as they thought they did? This is all very useful information that can be carried forwards. These are all things that can be addressed rather than just flying under the radar. This process really does shine a spotlight on these things. And number two, they have to make strategic decisions. For example, one of the things that happens all the time when students use the reverse engineered revision planning system for exam blocks is that they realize, okay, there just isn't enough time here for me to cover everything I want to in the detail that I want to do it. And students initially see this as a problem. But actually, this is giving them the chance to make strategic decisions before things get to that last minute and they end up in meltdown mode. So these would be decisions like, okay, do I need to do a shift swap at work to give myself more time for the revision? Or which topics are the more important ones to spend more of that time on, and which ones do I have to decide right now that I'm going to give less time to? Because it's best that we know this now. Because the other option is that we plow on regardless and end up panicking the day before the exam because we've realised that we're running out of time and the most important topics haven't actually even been touched yet. And if it's homework, we need to consider, okay, are they going to have to work into what was going to be their free time? Or do they now need to move some other tasks around so that they can finish it tomorrow? Do they choose to skip or reduce some parts? And yes, I did just say that. Now, I am not suggesting that they start handing in homework half finished and going, well, this is what Katie said, so this is what I'm doing. But I know that there are a lot of you with teens who are perfectionists. And when it comes to things like finding more and more and more research, making stacks of notes, spending tons of time making pretty front covers, or feeling like however many practice questions they do, it's never enough, having a time deadline can be really helpful, if only to make them realize, hey, I've just spent an hour choosing 3 photos for that PowerPoint. That's something that easily happens. And finally, here is the most important part to this whole concept, and specifically in relation to the title of this podcast: giving your teen more time off from their study, having a better life balance without sacrificing their results. Not only does scheduling outcomes mean that tasks are often getting done faster and more efficiently, but when students have given themselves specific timings for specific tasks and scheduled them to specific days and times, they're not working with a never-ending to-do list anymore. When that day's tasks are done, if the other tasks that would still normally be on that long to-do list are already scheduled for future days and times, then they can actually relax, enjoy their time, knowing that the other items are all accounted for. They know when they're happening and how, and that right now they don't need to be doing them. So notice that this concept really just means making, most likely, some small but super important tweaks to some of the strategies that they might have already been using. So like I said, if they're using those big wall planners or the long to-do lists, it's not that they're doing it wrong. They're kind of on the right track, but they just need to change and tweak them into chunked down, scheduled outcomes. And I'd love to hear how you go with this concept. In fact, any feedback you have on anything I've covered on the podcast so far, or requests for future episodes, please write it into a review on Apple Podcasts or drop me an email, support@rocksolidstudy.com. I want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, and the awesome. I am ready for all of it. So have a brilliant, productive, and organized day, and I will meet you back here next week. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you head on over to www.rocksolidstudy.com and sign up for my free parent guide, the 3 huge mistakes even smart students make in exams and assignments, and how to fix them immediately. And I'll see you back here next week.